The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes when the air is cool and the grass is heavy with dew. The meadow stretched out wide, a dark ocean of swaying blades, and in its center stood the great oak. It was older than anyone could say. Its trunk was wider than a cottage, its branches so high they seemed to touch the stars. The bark was rough and furrowed, like the face of someone who had lived 1,000 lives. You walked across the meadow, your steps muffled by the wet grass. The air smelled of earth and faint sweetness, the lingering perfume of clover that had closed its petals for the night. When you reached the oak, you laid your hand against its bark. It felt warm, as though the day's sunlight was still resting inside. And there, between two roots that curled into the ground like giant arms, was something you had never noticed before. A door. It was small, just high enough for you to duck through. Its wood was dark, almost the same shade as the oak's bark, and so worn with age, it blended perfectly into the tree. Only the faint outline gave it away, a thin crack where it met the root dot. At first, you thought it might be a trick of the moonlight, but when you placed your palm against it, you felt it, solid, real. The brass handle was cold beneath your fingers, shaped like a curled leaf. You hesitated for a moment, listening. The meadow was silent. The oak towered above you, branches shifting softly in the night breeze. It almost felt like the tree itself was watching, waiting. You took a breath and turned the handle. It creaked, the sound low and ancient, like something long asleep, stretching its limbs. The door swung inward, and a cool breath of air rose from the darkness below. It wasn't musty or stale, as you might expect, but fresh, carrying the scent of rain-soaked soil and deep moss. A staircase wound down into the earth, carved entirely from roots. They twisted into steps, smooth and solid, as though they had been growing into this shape for centuries. Tiny threads of glowing moss clung to the walls, their light soft and silver blue, just enough to see by. The air shifted as you stepped inside. The noise of the meadow, faint as it had been, fell away. In its place came a deep stillness, the kind of stillness that fills old libraries and hidden rooms. You closed the door gently behind you. It shut with a sound like a sigh, leaving only the glow of the moss and the long stairway spiraling downward. And so, you began to descend, each step carrying you deeper beneath the roots of the great oak, into a world no one above would ever guess existed. Asterisk, the staircase wound downward for longer than you expected. Step after step, the roots carried you deeper, curling into patterns like braids. Some twisted together overhead, forming arches that gave the passage the feeling of a living cathedral. The mate light of the moss grew brighter the further you went. It painted the walls with a gentle glow, enough that you could see your hand stretched out before you. Every so often, you passed little patches of fungi clinging to the curves of the roots. They gave off their own pale shimmer, white and gold, like tiny lanterns placed to guide your way. The air grew cooler. You could feel it on your face, soft and damp, like the breath of a hidden cave. Yet it was not unpleasant. There was something strangely welcoming about it, as if the earth itself was exhaling around you at last. The stairway ended. You stepped down onto a floor of polished stone, cool beneath your feet. Before you stretched a vast hall. It wasn't carved by hands, but grown. Towering roots rose from the floor and curved into the ceiling like great pillars, their barks smoothed and gleaming as if polished over countless years. Between them, walls of books stretched upward, higher than you could see. Yes, books, shelves upon shelves of them, bound in leather, in wood, in fabrics faded with time. Some looked new, their spines neat and clean. Others were cracked and fragile, their titles worn away. The air carried their scent, dry and warm, the perfume of paper and ink and centuries. The hall was silent, but not empty. You could hear faint sounds, the flutter of a page turning somewhere far above, the hush of something moving across the floor, too quietly to be seen. In the center of the hall stood a table, carved from a single slab of dark oak. On it rested a lantern, burning with steady golden light. The flame didn't flicker, though no glass enclosed it. It was as though the fire burned patiently, without need for air. You approached the table. As you drew closer, you noticed something resting beside the lantern. A book was already open. The pages glowed faintly, as though written with ink that held starlight. The words weren't in any language you recognized. It was telling your story, your footsteps across the meadow, your hand on the bark, the moment you first touched the hidden door, line by line. Everything that had just happened was written there, as though the book had been waiting for you. You turned the page. The next lines described you standing at the table now. Reading the words, as they appeared, and then the line that followed was blank, waiting, asterisk. The empty line on the glowing page held your gaze. It felt alive, as though the words were breathing, waiting for your next move. For a moment, you hesitated, the silence of the hall pressing gently around you. And then you heard it, a soft shuffle of movement, not threatening, not hurried, more like the brushing of fabric against stone. You lifted your eyes from the book. Someone was there between the tall roots. At the far end of the hall, a figure appeared. They moved slowly, their steps making no sound on the polished floor. Their robe flowed behind them, the color of deep soil, stitched with faint threads that caught the lantern light. It was hard to tell if they were old or young, for their face seemed timeless, neither wrinkled nor smooth, but somewhere between. When they reached the table, they stopped, folding their hands in front of them. Their voice, when it came, was soft, carrying the weight of many quiet years. "You've opened the door," they said. Few ever find it. Their eyes, dark and steady, move to the glowing book in front of you. And the book has chosen to write for you. That means you are meant to be here. You looked back at the page. Another line had appeared. You are not alone. The keeper, for that was what they seemed to be, stepped closer. They gestured gently to the endless shelves that climbed into the unseen ceiling. This, he, is the library beneath the roots. Every life leaves behind a story, and every story finds its way here. Some are complete, some are still being written, and some, like yours, are just beginning. Their words stirred something inside you, a feeling both of wonder and of quiet weight. You asked, softly, "Who writes the stories?" The keeper's lips curved in a faint smile. "The roots do. The tree above us drinks the years of the world, and down here it grows them into pages. The oak remembers what people forget. It records what even time lets slip away." They lowered their hand to the open book before you. The glowing ink shifted, swirling like liquid starlight, then settled into new words. You may choose where the story goes next. The keeper looked at you, eyes calm but searching. Every visitor is given one chance to step into the shelves, to take a story from the roots and walk within it. You may learn what was, what could be, or what will come. But only once. Their voice grew softer, so choose carefully. The hall seemed to hold its breath. The shelves towered above you, filled with countless lives, countless paths, and somewhere among them, a story waited. The one you might choose to enter, you might choose to enter. The keeper's words lingered in the still air, settling into you like echoes that wouldn't fade. Around you, the shelves seemed endless, too vast to wander without being lost forever. The keeper studied you quietly for a moment, then reached beneath the oak-carved table. Their hands emerged carrying 3 books, each resting gently in their palms. They placed them in front of you. Side by side, the first was bound in soft green leather, its cover traced with faint patterns of vines. When the lantern's glow touched it, you swore you saw leaves move, curling and uncurling, as though alive. This, the keeper said, is a story of the natural world, a path that will take you into the heart of forests and rivers, where the earth speaks in ways most never hear. The second book was heavier, bound in deep blue cloth. A silver thread wound around it, holding it closed. You could hear a faint hum from it, like the sound of distant waves against a shore, or perhaps voices whispering through stone corridors. This one, they continued, is a story of memory. It will lead you into places that have been forgotten, where echoes of the past linger and wait to be seen again. The third was small, almost unassuming. Its cover was plain black, smooth as polished glass. No title, no symbol. Yet, when you leaned closer, you felt warmth rising from it, as though it held a pulse beneath its surface. And this, the keeper said at last, lowering their voice, is a story of what may yet come. The roots do not often show the future, but sometimes they allow a glimpse. The books sat before you, glowing faintly in the golden lantern light. The green one breathed of forests and wild earth. The blue one hummed of echoes in lost places. The black one waited, silent and steady, like a door not yet opened. The keeper folded their hands. You may only open one. You reached out, your fingers hovering above the 3 choices. Asterisk, your hand hovered above the 3 choices, drifting between the green and the blue, but always circling back to the plain black cover. It had no title, no symbol, no hint of what rested inside, and yet it seemed to wait for you. You let your fingers settle on it. The surface was warm, almost alive, as if it had been resting near a heartbeat. The keeper said nothing. They only watched as you drew it closer, the lantern light sliding over its glass-like skin. Slowly, you opened it. At first, The pages were empty, white, silent, unmarked. You turned one, then another, until faint lines began to appear, rising from the blankness like ink pulled out of air dot. They formed shapes before words, an outline of a door. The same door you had opened above, hidden between the oak's roots. The drawing shimmered, then moved. The page became a window, and you saw it not as a sketch, but as something living. The door stood once again beneath the oak, but this time the meadow around it was different. The grass was dry, bent low as though scorched by long sun. The sky above was pale, almost white, and the tree itself, the great oak, seemed tired, its branches bare, its barks splitting in long, deep cracks. You felt the faintest ache in your chest. The oak had stood so strong, so timeless. To see it hollowed and weary was like watching a friend grow suddenly old. The page shifted again. New images rose, like visions flowing one into another. A river running shallow, its stones dry. A village, windows shuttered, smoke no longer curling from the chimneys. And finally, the library itself. This very hall, its shelves splintered, its books lying in heaps, their ink running black as spilled water. The lantern beside you flickered for the first time. You drew in a breath, and the page went still. Words bled across the bottom line in that same starlit ink. This is one way the roots may end. The keeper's voice was gentle, but it carried a weight. The future is not fixed. What you see is only a shadow of what could be, and shadows may yet be changed. They closed their eyes for a moment, as if listening to something deep below. Then they said, "If you choose to walk this story, you may learn what thread unravels it. But such paths are heavy. They leave marks." The book pulsed faintly under your hands, waiting for your choice. Would you step inside to learn what future danger lingered, or close it, letting the vision fade like a dream left behind? Asterisk. The pages pulsed softly beneath your hands, as though urging you forward. The vision of the withered oak and broken shelves hung in your chest like a weight. And yet, curiosity pulled stronger than fear. You pressed your palm flat against the page. The warmth spread upward through your arm, pulling you deeper until the library around you began to fade. The shelves melted into mist. The lantern dissolved into gold dust, and the keeper's calm figure vanished as if drawn behind a curtain. For a moment, there was nothing just the feel of falling, slow and steady, like drifting down a deep river. Then your feet found ground again. You opened your eyes and stood beneath the same oak tree. But it was no longer the one you had touched above the meadow. Its bark was cracked, the roots dry and brittle, branches stretched overhead like empty arms, stripped of leaves. The meadow was silent. No crickets, no whisper of grass. Even the air seemed thin, as though the world itself had forgotten how to breathe. Ahead, the little door in the roots waited, half open. Its brass handle was tarnished, green with rust. A faint darkness pooled inside. You stepped through. The staircase was still there, but the moss along its walls no longer glowed. Only faint threads of light remained, fading like the last embers of a fire. Your footsteps echoed too sharply, as if the earth itself had hollowed out. When you reached the first hall, your breath caught. The library lay in ruins. Shelves splintered and sagged. Piles of books were scattered across the floor, their pages torn and smeared with black stains that looked like spilled ink, but smelled faintly of ash. The lantern in the center of the room still stood, but its flame flickered, weak and uneven, as though it struggled against some unseen wind. And then you heard it. Not silence, not anymore. A sound moved in the ruined hall, slow, dragging, like the shuffle of something heavy across the stone floor. You weren't alone. In the far shadows, between the fallen shelves, a figure moved, its shape bent and stretched, too tall to be human, too thin to belong to any creature you knew. Its body seemed to leak darkness, as if it was made from the very ink spilled across the pages. And its face, if it had one, turned toward you. The air grew colder. The lantern flame shivered, and from the ruined shelves, a single book slid to the floor with a hollow thud, opening itself as though waiting. The shadowed figure began to approach. Asterisk. The figure's slow steps echoed through the ruined hall, each one dragging like weight across stone. Its outline wavered in the dim lantern light, stretched and jagged, like a shadow torn loose from its owner. You felt its gaze on you, heavy and cold, but then your eyes fell to the book lying open on the floor. It seemed to call, its pages glowing faintly, the only light in all that darkness. Your heart thudded softly as you chose. You stepped toward the book. The air around it shimmered faintly, almost like heat above summer stones. Kneeling, you reached out and touched the page at once. The letters rose, glowing brighter, arranging themselves into words. The rot begins with silence. You turned another page when stories are left unread. When voices are forgotten, the roots wither. The silence grows, and from silence comes the shadow. The ink pulsed, and you felt the meaning sink into you. This ruin wasn't born from fire or storm, but from neglect, from stories abandoned, from memories allowed to fade. The oak thrived on voices, on lives remembered. Without them, it crumbled, and in its emptiness, the shadow had grown. You glanced up. The figure was closer now, moving slowly, yet its presence filled the entire hall. Its form bent unnaturally, arms too long, shoulders hunched. As it drew nearer, the black stains across the floor spread wider. Like ink bleeding through paper, the lantern sputtered. Your hand gripped the book tighter. The next line had already appeared, glowing with urgency. If you can speak, the silence will break. But you must not falter. The figure paused, as though listening. Its head tilted slightly, the way one leans toward a sound just out of reach. The library waited. You drew in a deep, steady breath. The book trembled faintly in your hands, the words glowing brighter as if urging you on. The shadow tilted its head again, listening, waiting. You opened your mouth. At first, no sound came. Your throat felt tight, as though the silence itself clung to you, trying to hold the words back. But you pushed through, letting the words spill into the air. They are not forgotten. The words cracked, small and fragile, but they carried. They rippled across the ruined hall, soft as water over stone. The figure stiffened, its shape flickering as if the sound had struck something deep inside it. You read from the glowing page, the syllables warm and steady. Stories do not die when spoken. They live, they breathe. The lantern's light swelled. The shadow recoiled, retreating a step, its form unraveling at the edges. The black stains on the stone floor quivered, pulling back as though resisting. Your voice grew stronger. Every whisper, every memory, every name carried in these walls, they are alive. The hall seemed to respond. A low hum stirred through the broken shelves, like voices beginning to rise. After a long silence, faint echoes, threads of old words drifted in the air, weaving around you like unseen companions. The figure staggered, its head lowering. It pressed its long fingers against the floor, as though the light of your voice burned. You felt the book's final line bloom with light beneath your fingertips. The silence is only broken when one dares to speak. Your voice steadied, calm and unshaken now. I dare. The word rang through the ruins like a bell, and the shadow shrank, its body folded inward, its edges curling away like paper touched by flame. It gave no scream, no roar, only a low, shuddering exhale like air escaping a cavern. And then it was gone, dissolved into nothing, leaving only the faint smell of damp earth and old ash. The stains faded. The broken shelves stood cleaner. The lantern steadied, its glow no longer weak. The silence had been cracked. But as you closed the book, a final thought passed through you, quiet and chilling. That was only one shadow, and the oak's roots were vast. Asterisk. The silence held for a moment, deep and steady. Not the empty silence from before, but something fuller, alive. You stood in the ruined hall with a book pressed against your chest, the lantern burning steady and warm at your side. Then the stone beneath your feet vibrated, a low tremor like the breath of something vast. The shelves rattled softly, dust sifting down in pale clouds. You steadied yourself, listening. The sound rose, not from the hall, but from far below, from deep within the oak's roots. It was slow, resonant, like the voice of the earth itself. Little one, you have spoken. The words weren't heard through your ears, but through your bones. They vibrated in your ribs, your spine, your very blood. For so long, I have listened to silence. I feared it had become all that remained. But you have reminded me, a single voice is enough to break the stillness, enough to call the others back. The lantern's glow spread farther now, climbing the walls, brushing the upper arches of the ruined ceiling. For the first time, you could see carvings etched into the stone, curling branches, spirals of leaves, and shapes of countless eyes, all watching, all waiting. The shadow you faced was born of neglect, not malice. It is what grows when memory fades, when stories are abandoned. But it is not gone. Many linger. They will return again, unless the voices return as well. You clutched the book tighter. How? What can I do? The oak's voice rumbled, deep and weary, yet laced with hope. Carry the stories. Speak them. Whisper them in the stillness. Pass them forward. Every word spoken is a thread mended. Every memory told is a root strengthened. You need not fight the shadow with strength. You fight it with remembrance. The carvings along the walls shimmered faintly, as if inked with light. Will you take this burden, little one? Will you become a keeper of the roots? The hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for your answer. Asterisk, your hands tightened around the book. Its weight no heavier than before, yet carrying the feel of something vast and ancient. The lantern burned steady, its glow warmer now, like it had been waiting for this choice all along. You didn't need time to decide. The oak's voice had already rooted itself in you. I will, you whispered. Your voice was soft, but the words carried, filling the ruined hall the way light fills a hollow. The tremor beneath your feet deepened, not with danger, but with something like relief. A great exhale, the breath of an old giant loosening after holding still for too long. Then you are not only a listener now, you are a keeper. The carvings along the walls brightened one by one. Branches curled outward, leaves glowed pale green, and the shapes of countless eyes opened, not threatening, but watchful, patient. They saw you, acknowledged you. The book in your hands warmed. Its pages fluttered, as if caught by a wind you could not feel. When it stilled, the words had changed. The keeper speaks when silence grows. The keeper listens when stories falter. The keeper remembers, so the roots may endure. The lantern flared, and for a moment, you glimpsed threads of light weaving through the ruined shelves, faint, fragile strands that stretched far beyond the hall, down into the deep roots of the oak itself. Every story, every voice that had ever passed through here was not gone, only waiting, waiting for someone to speak them again. The oak's voice rumbled once more, softer now. Do not think you stand alone. The roots are many. The voices are countless. You are one thread in a vast weaving. Trust that it will hold you as you hold it. You bowed your head. The truth of it settling into you. This was not about fighting shadows with flame or steel. It was about carrying words, speaking them, remembering. A burden, yes, but also a gift. The lantern's glow wrapped you like a cloak. The hall no longer felt ruined, only waiting, and you no longer felt lost. Asterisk, the hall was quiet now, but not empty. It felt like the hush of a listening crowd, all waiting for you. The book lay open in your hands, its blank pages glowing faintly. ready. Your heart thudded. What story could you tell here, in this vast place, under the weight of so many forgotten voices? You weren't a scholar. You weren't a sage. You were just, you dot, and then you remembered. A small memory, fragile and plain. The kind that usually drifts away. Unnoticed, you cleared your throat, nervous at first. Once, you began softly. My grandmother told me a story about the sparrows that lived in the rafters of her house. Every winter, when the snow grew deep, she said they would come closer, pecking at the windows, as if asking to be let in. She used to scatter crumbs along the sill for them. She said it was their way of saying thank you when they sang at dawn. The words felt almost too small for the room. But the moment they left your lips, the air shifted. The lantern brightened. The carvings on the walls shimmered faintly, like ripples spreading across still water. Encouraged, you went on. She said, the sparrows always knew when spring was close. They sang louder, sharper before the thaw, and when the first green shoots pushed through the frost, the sparrows disappeared again, back to their secret places. But she said she never minded. She said their voices carried the promise of return. The book pulsed. Ink spread across its blank page, transcribing your words in curling lines of light. The moment you finished, the roots beneath the hall shifted again, humming low and steady like approval. The oak's voice filled you once more. No story is too small. No memory too simple. Even a sparrow's song carries weight when remembered. You have spoken life back into the roots. You stared down at the glowing page. Your grandmother's story preserved now in this place, as though the oak itself had adopted it. It was humbling and empowering. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt ready, and for the first time, you understood. Every word spoken here was a spark, and sparks lit the dark. You held the book a little longer, feeling the warmth of your grandmother's story glowing on the page. Then, gently, you closed it. The light sank into the cover, steady and quiet, as if the memory had found a permanent home. The oak's deep voice lingered, soft as a fading echo. When you are ready, more doors will open, and with that, the roots shifted once again. This time, it wasn't a tremor beneath your feet, but a slow unraveling. The great hall expanded, its walls peeling back like bark shedding in strips. A new passageway revealed itself, curving downward in a spiral of dark wood and faint silver veins. Lanterns lit along the curve on their own, one after another, like fireflies guiding the way. You hesitated. The chamber you left was safe, calm, full of warmth. But something about that spiral tugged at you, promising deeper truths. Not just stories spoken, but stories buried. So you stepped forward. The air cooled as you descended. The wooden steps felt damp, like roots twisting through soil. The deeper you went, the more muffled the world became, as though the earth itself was closing in around you. Finally, the path opened into a wide cavern. This was no ordinary library. The walls were alive with roots that glowed faintly, each one cradling small glass orbs like fruit. Inside each orb, something moved shapes, flickers of faces, fragments of voices. They pressed faintly against the glass, like memories caught in bubbles, waiting to be freed. At the center of the cavern stood another lectern, taller than the one before. But this one held no book. Instead, a shallow stone basin rested on top, filled with clear water that shimmered with faint starlight. The roots above whispered as you drew near, their voices braided together into a single thought. Here lie the stories unspoken, those carried in silence, those buried in the heart but never given words. The basin rippled. Your reflection wavered in it, but it wasn't just your face you saw. Behind you, other faces flickered in the water, faces you recognize only dimly, strangers, ancestors, perhaps even pieces of yourself. The library was offering you a choice: to place your hand in the basin and let it show you one of the unspoken stories. Asterisk, you stood before the basin, its still surface gleaming faintly in the cavern's quiet light. The orbs along the roots glowed in silence, but your eyes kept returning to the water. It was patient, waiting, almost expectant. Slowly, you reached out. The moment your fingertips touched the surface, the water rippled outward in wide rings. The coolness spread through your skin, up your arm, into your chest. And for a moment, it felt like your breath itself had merged with the basin. Then the cavern dissolved. You found yourself standing in a narrow room. The air smelled of chalk, dust, and ink, faint and dry. Wooden desks stood in rows, small and worn smooth from years of use. A single window leaked pale daylight onto the floor, and at one of the desks sat a young boy, his hands clenched around a pencil, his head bent low over an empty page. His lips moved silently, but no sound came out. He stared at the paper as if it were a locked door, as if words lived inside him but refused to step into the world. You realized this must be one of the unspoken stories, a memory or life that had never been voiced. The boy's eyes lifted suddenly, as if sensing you, but he didn't look startled, more like he had been waiting. His pencil scratched once, and a single word appeared on the paper, faint and fragile. Please. Your throat tightened. This wasn't a story to listen to. This was a story asking for help. The water in the basin rippled again, and you understood. You could lend your voice. You could speak aloud the words the boy could never say, giving life to the silence behind you. The glow of the cavern pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. Waiting for your choice. Asterisk. The boy's eyes stayed on you, wide and waiting. His hand trembled on the pencil, but no sound left his lips. The single word on the page, please, glimmered faintly as though it were alive, but fragile. You swallowed your own voice, feeling heavy in your chest. Then you spoke. At first, the words stumbled. You want to be heard, you whispered, unsure if you were saying it right. But the boy's shoulders relaxed a little, as though even that small beginning lifted a weight from him. So you tried again. You have something inside you. It's not too small. It's not too weak. It matters. The boy's pencil scratched faster now, words appearing though his lips stayed silent. I was afraid no one would care. Afraid it would sound wrong. You gave the words breath. You thought no one would care, that it might come out wrong. The air in the classroom shifted. The dust in the light caught and swirled like it had been stirred awake. The boy's eyes grew brighter, his small shoulders straighter. More words bled onto the page. But I still wanted someone to know I was here. Your chest ached. You read them aloud. Voice steadier this time. You wanted someone to know you were here. The glow from the window deepened, spilling across the floor like gold. The boy's lips parted, and for the first time, you heard a sound soft, thin, but real. A single syllable, shaky but clear. Here, the classroom dissolved. You were back in the cavern, hand still resting in the basin. The water was calm now, but its surface shone brighter than before, reflecting not just your face, but the boy's, too, faint and steady beside yours. The oak's voice returned, deep and resonant. You have carried another silence into sound. This is the library's purpose: to remember what was never spoken, to give roots to what was lost. The basin stilled. The boy's image faded, but not gone preserved now. Somewhere beneath the roots, you stepped back, breath slow, heart heavy, but lighter at the same time. You hadn't just watched a story. You had become part of one, and the chamber felt different now, as though other voices had noticed. The orbs in the roots flickered faintly, as if more stories were leaning toward you, waiting their turn. Asterisk, you turned from the basin, its glow still clinging faintly to your skin, and walked toward the walls. The roots twisted thick around the chamber, each cradling a glass orb that pulsed like a quiet heartbeat. Up close, you saw movement within them, shapes drifting in and out of focus, fragments of scenes frozen mid-breath. Some showed faces, blurred but aching with expression. Others only hinted at places: a riverbank, a dim attic, as if it carried a pulse of its own. The instant your fingers brushed its surface, the root tightened protectively, but then slowly relaxed, releasing it. The glass melted in your hand. Light flooded your vision. You were standing on a narrow cobblestone street. Rain slicked the stones, and lanterns swayed faintly in the damp breeze. The world smelled of wet earth and iron. Ahead of you, a woman stood beneath a crooked doorway, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. She looked out at the street as if waiting for someone who never came. Her lips moved, but no sound carried. Only her eyes spoke deep, tired, filled with something unspoken. Then you realized what it was. She was holding words she'd never dared to say. Words she had rehearsed 1,000 times, but swallowed every time footsteps echoed close. The air around you thickened. The library was asking again, would you give voice to her silence? The woman's hand pressed against her chest, her mouth forming shapes you could almost read. Not anger, not even grief, just longing, simple and raw. The rain tapped gently at the stones, waiting for your choice. Asterisk. Asterisk. The street was hushed, the rain falling, soft and steady. The woman's silence heavier than the night air. Her lips moved again, faintly, almost pleading. You felt the weight of her words pressing against your chest, even though she never spoke them. So you drew a slow breath and lent her your voice. I miss you, you whispered. The woman's eyes closed as if in relief. Her shoulders dropped, and for a moment, the tension in her frame softened. She mouthed more words, and you felt them form in your own throat, trembling as they left you. I thought you would come back. I waited. I still wait. The lanterns along the street flickered. The rain slowed, each drop seeming to hang in the air a heartbeat longer before falling. The woman's hands, clasped at her chest, loosened. She looked younger now, less worn. Her lips shaped one last phrase, and your voice carried it into the world for her. I forgive you. The silence after was different, lighter, almost kind. The woman stepped back into the doorway, her face no longer strained, but calm. Then, as if the rain itself carried her away, she faded into the mist. The cobblestone street dissolved. You stood once again in the cavern of roots, the orb gone from your hand. In its place was only a faint glow along your palm, fading slowly into your skin. The orb's place in the wall now held a hollow, but the root hummed softly. Content. The oak's voice rumbled, faint and low, like thunder far away. Each silence given voice becomes a root made whole. You walk not only among stories, you carry them forward. Around you, more orbs flickered. Some glowed brighter now, stirred by what you had done, as though more stories were leaning toward you, hungry to be heard. But deeper in the cavern, beyond the furthest roots, you noticed something else, a narrow crack in the wall, barely wide enough to slip through. From within it, a faint light shimmered, different from the glow of the orb's colder, sharper, almost secretive. Asterisk, the crack in the wall called to you. It wasn't warm and welcoming like the root's orbs was, sharper like the edge of a secret. For a moment, you hesitated, listening to the hum of the cavern. The oak's voice was silent now, leaving the choice to you. You slipped sideways, pressing your shoulder through the narrow space. The wood scraped lightly against your clothes as you squeezed through. The air changed immediately, cooler, thinner, carrying a faint metallic temps, as if stone lived deeper here than soil. On the other side, the chamber was smaller, more confined. The roots here were brittle and thin, pale instead of glowing. They looked almost starved. The walls were stone rather than living wood, rough and cold. In the center of the room, a single object rested, a blackened orb, unlike the others. It didn't glow. It pulsed faintly, but the light inside it was dim and fractured, like a candle burning low in a storm. When you drew closer, you felt it before you touched it, a heaviness, a weight that pressed not against your body, but against your thoughts. sadness, dense and unmoving. This was no ordinary silence. This was a silence so deep it had nearly vanished altogether. Your breath grew shallow. You knew instinctively that freeing this story would not be as simple as speaking. It would ask something more of you. The orb pulsed again, faint and unsteady, as if struggling to keep its last ember alive. The chamber seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what you would do. Asterisk, you stepped closer to the blackened orb, its dim pulse steady but weak, like a heartbeat fading. The air around it carried no warmth, a chill that clung to your skin. You hesitated, your hand hovering. Part of you wanted to retreat back to the safer glow of the cavern, to the lighter stories that waited like lanterns in the dark. But something in this fragile ember called to you. You reached out. The instant your fingertips brushed the surface, a sharp cold surged through your arm, biting deep, almost painful. You gasped, but you didn't let go. The orb trembled in your hand, its faint light flickering, fighting against the weight pressing in on it. Then the world fell away. You were standing in an empty house. The walls were bare, the floorboards dusty, the windows clouded. The silence here wasn't peaceful, it was hollow. Echoing dot at the far end of the room. A figure sat hunched in a wooden chair. You couldn't see their face, only their outline, small and still. They didn't move when you entered. For a long moment, you just stood there, not knowing what to do. Then you realized the silence here wasn't the kind that asked for words. It was the kind that came from being unseen. Forgotten, the figure's head turned slightly, just enough for you to feel their awareness. But they didn't speak. They didn't even try. They only existed, faint and fading, like the last ember of the orb. The weight pressed on you again, urging you. This wasn't about telling their story. It was about keeping it from disappearing. You could walk away and the silence would swallow them whole. Or you could step forward, place your hand gently on their shoulder, and simply acknowledge that they were here. The room waited. The figure waited. The orb in your palm trembled. Asterisk, you drew a steady breath and crossed the quiet floorboards. Each step stirred faint echoes, the only sound in the hollow house. The figure in the chair didn't move, didn't flinch. They seemed carved from stillness itself. You stopped just behind them. For a moment, you hesitated, your hand hovering. Then, you lowered it gently to their shoulder. The figure stiffened under your touch. Their body felt cold, fragile, as though even the smallest pressure might shatter them. But you didn't pull away. You stayed. No words came, none were needed. Something shifted. The silence broke, not with sound, but with recognition. The figure lifted their head. You saw no clear face, only a faint outline, lit from within. A glow, flickering like a candle, shielded from wind. For the first time, they weren't fading. They were seen. The house around you brightened, dust lifting into streams of soft light. The windows cleared, letting in the glow of a pale dawn. The figure straightened slowly, their outline firmer, more certain. And then they turned fully toward you. No words, just a nod, gesture of gratitude, so quiet it felt heavier than speech. The vision dissolved. You were back in the hidden chamber. The blackened orb gone from your hand. In its place, faint warmth lingered against your skin. The cold completely gone. The root that had cradled the orb pulsed faintly now, as if drawing strength from what had just happened. The oak's voice filled the chamber, deep and low. Not every silence asks for words. Some only ask for witness. You have given them that, and the roots remember. The small chamber grew brighter, the pale roots less brittle. Something that had been starving was alive again. Behind you, the narrow crack glimmered faintly, leading back into the larger cavern where countless other orbs glowed like waiting stars. Waiting stars. You turned in place, letting your eyes adjust to the glow that now pulsed faintly along the chamber walls. The brittle roots that once looked pale and starved had begun to drink in color again. Faint green threads weaving through their surface like veins filling with life. It struck you that this chamber wasn't dead, had simply been forgotten. The oak's voice lingered like a murmur in your chest. Not words this time, but a steady hum of approval. You didn't step through the crack right away. Something tugged at you, urging you to look deeper. The chamber was small, but as you pressed your hand along the far wall, you felt it a seam in the stone. A narrow groove, almost invisible, curving downward when you pushed. The wall shifted. A panel of stone gave way, sliding with a low groan, and revealed a tiny recess carved into the earth. Inside, resting on a cradle of roots, was not an orb, but a shard of dark wood. It looked broken from something larger. Its surface was etched with patterns too faint to read, and yet it hummed faintly, carrying the same pulse you'd felt in the orb, but stronger, older, heavier. When your hand hovered near it, the shard gave off warmth as though it wanted to be lifted. Behind you, the crack leading back to the main cavern glowed faintly, a reminder of the safer path. But here, in this recess, was something different, something hidden, deliberately waiting to be found. The roots whispered faintly around you, the sound like dry leaves stirring, not warning, not quite invitation either, just waiting. Asterisk, you reached into the recess and wrapped your fingers around the shard. It was warm, too warm for wood buried this deep. The surface was smooth in places, splintered in others, and when you lifted it free, the roots that held it twitched as if they didn't want to let go. The shard pulsed once in your hand hard, enough to make your arm tremble. Images hit you, not as pictures, but as feelings. An endless expanse of forest, taller than any you'd seen, its canopy blotting out the sky. A storm tearing across the land. Fire, black smoke curling through the air. And then silence and aching, endless silence. Your chest grew heavy, your breath shallow. For a moment, you thought the shard might crush you under its weight. But then the warmth steadied and the images faded, leaving only a quiet hum that matched your own heartbeat. The oak's voice came, softer than before, threaded with something that almost sounded like grief. That is no simple fragment. It is a piece of what was broken, a piece of the first tree whose fall gave roots to all others. Few who enter here ever touch it. Fewer still are able to hold it without being undone. The shard darkened in your grip, then brightened again, as though testing you, and in that brightness, words flickered not spoken, but pressed directly into your mind. Carry me, if you dare. My story is not yet finished. Behind you, the crack to the larger cavern glowed more brightly now, as if urging you back. The countless orbs beyond seemed restless, their glow shifting. But in your hands, the shard thrummed like a heartbeat, heavy with memory and promise. Asterisk, you didn't rush. The shard was alive in your hands, its pulse steady but insistent. If you carried it blindly into the cavern, you knew it might rouse something you weren't ready for. So you stayed. You sank onto the stone floor, cross-legged, and let the weight rest across your palms. The hum grew stronger the moment you stilled. Not a sound, more like a vibration threading into your bones. Then it began to separate into layers, a rhythm like rain on leaves, a rush like wind in the canopy, a low boom like thunder rolling over hills, and beneath it all, a voice. I was the first. The shard flickered, faint cracks glowing along its grain. Before the houses, before the bridges, before the stones were carved into walls, I grew when the world was wild. My crown scraped the stars. My roots drank from the bones of the earth. All trees are my children. When I fell, the world split, and from my body, forests rose. The air grew heavy, almost too thick to breathe. Your heart thudded in your chest. But I was not broken by age, nor storm, nor fire. I was broken by hands, by those who feared silence, by those who wanted light, but not shadow, wood, but not memory. I fell not by time, but by will. The warmth turned sharp, almost burning. You gritted your teeth, refusing to let go. The oak's voice entered again, quieter than ever. You now hold the wound that made the library possible. That shard remembers the first cut. That story cannot be undone. The shard dimmed, its fire ebbing, though the heat lingered in your palms. You felt it settle into you, not just an object now, but a weight you carried, a memory braided with your own. When you stood, the chamber no longer felt small. The roots bowed slightly overhead, as though acknowledging what you held. The crack to the cavern glimmered wider now, waiting. The orbs beyond glowed with restless light, as though sensing what you carried. Asterisk, you tightened your grip on the shard, its surface still warm, and turned toward the crack. The glow beyond tugged at you, insistent, almost urgent. With one last glance at the chamber, its roots now alive, its silence no longer hollow, you stepped through. The air shifted the moment you entered the cavern of orbs, where before they had glowed with a steady, star-like calm. Now they flickered, restless. Dozens, then hundreds, dimmed and flared in uneven waves, as if some invisible wind had swept across them. The shard in your hand pulsed in answer. The orbs responded, brighter now, their light weaving together into thin streams that arced across the chamber. They weren't random, they formed a pattern, threads of pale fire stretching from orb to orb until the whole cavern shimmered like a vast net of stars. The oak's voice rumbled low, strained. They have felt the shard. They know the wound. The first memory wakes all others. One orb near you cracked faintly, a sliver of light spilling down its surface like molten glass. Another trembled, humming with a pitch so sharp it stung your teeth. Then you realized they weren't breaking. They were opening. Stories long sealed were pressing toward you, eager, urgent, desperate to be heard. Each orb felt alive, pulling at your attention. Too many, too much. The shard pulsed hard against your palm, anchoring you. Its warmth spread up your arm, steadying the chaos. But the pull didn't stop. The cavern was awake now. The stories were awake, and all of them wanted a listener. Asterisk, you tightened your fingers around the shard, letting its pulse steady your breath. The temptation to choose for yourself was strong. The nearest orb glowed so brightly it almost felt alive, but you knew better. The shard was more than a fragment. It was a compass. So you closed your eyes. The shard answered at once. Its warmth grew sharper, not painful, but insistent. A current flowing into your palm, drawing your arm upward like a tide. Your hand lifted, not by your will, but by its dot. When you opened your eyes again, the cavern had changed. The shimmering web of light threads blurred, dimming into the background. Only one orb remained clear, shining as if the shard had burned away the haze around it. Unlike the others, its glow wasn't pure white-tit, swirled with shifting shades of silver and pale blue. Like moonlight caught in deep water, the oak's voice trembled through the roots above. The shard remembers where it came from. That is the orb it seeks. The memory of the breaking. Your heart kicked once, hard the breaking. You stepped toward the orb. Its surface rippled faintly, as if it were not glass, but water. Each ripple hummed low, echoing in your chest. The closer you came, the heavier the air grew. Not oppressive, more like expectation pressing down, weighing every step. When you raised the shard, the orb stirred. Its surface cracked in slow lines, glowing veins spreading outward like frost. A hush fell across the chamber. Every other orb stilled, dimmed, waiting. Then With a soft shiver, the chosen orb split open. Light poured out, not in a burst, but in a steady flow that reached toward you like mist curling from a lantern. It touched the shard first, then your skin, and then the floor vanished. The cavern, the roots, even the oak's steady voice fell away. You were falling, but not downward. Light carried you until it softened into shapes. At first, there was only blur, shadows stretched tall like pillars, a ceiling lost in shifting mist, a floor of roots woven so tightly they looked like stone. Then the blur sharpened, and you understood. You stood inside the library, not the fractured cavern you knew, but whole. The air glowed with quiet brilliance. Thousands of orbs floated in ordered arcs, not random clusters, each one tethered by threads of light that formed a lattice, vast as the night sky. They pulsed in harmony, a rhythm like breath. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, each orb brightening as another dimmed, as if the library itself were alive. And at its heart stood the oak, younger, stronger, its trunk unscarred, its branches stretched so far they pierced the cavern walls, vanishing into endless dark. For a moment, it was overwhelming. Too much beauty, too much balance. Then came the sound, a crack, faint like ice underfoot. The harmony faltered. The orbs stuttered in their rhythm, threads twitching out of sync. Another crack followed, sharper, splitting the stillness. And then another. From above, a black vein crawled down through the roots. It spread fast, jagged, branching into smaller veins that cut across the ceiling like lightning frozen in place. Wherever it touched, the orbs dimmed, their glow strangled. The oak roared not with words, but with the raw sound of something breaking apart. Its branches thrashed, trying to hold the lattice together. The orbs shook in place, straining against invisible pressure. One by one, they shattered. Light burst from them like stars dying, their stories spilling into the void as fragments. Some tried to reform, but the black veins consumed them, dragging the light into silence. The shard in your hand pulsed hard, syncing with the moment when one orb near the oak split wide. You saw it fragment, splinter, then fall, its pieces scattering. One shard, just like the one you held now, tumbled out of sight, and with that, the vision lurched, the memory blurred, edges tearing away like paper soaked in water. The oak's roar became a distant thunder. Fading, you were being pulled back of the moment of shattering, back into yourself, back into the cavern of orbs. The chosen orb dimmed, cracked open and lifeless now, its story told. The shard in your hand glowed brighter than ever, trembling like it had remembered too much. The oak's voice finally returned, heavy with sorrow. Now you have seen. The library was not merely broken. It was wounded. Something struck it. Something from beyond these roots. And it will come again. Asterisk. The silence that followed the oak's words pressed down heavier than the vision itself. You stared at the shard, its glow uneven now, flickering like it struggled under the weight of what it had shown you. The memory still burned in your mind, the black veins, the breaking, the shattering of countless orbs. And behind it all, one question pulsed louder than the rest. Why you? The oak seemed to sense the thought before you could speak. Its voice rolled through the chamber, slower now, strained. The shard cannot reveal its memory to just anyone. It seeks resonance, a spirit that can carry the weight of another's story without losing their own. You swallowed, though your throat felt dry. Why me, then? Why not one of the others before me? You must have had visitors. The roots around the cavern shifted, creaking softly. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The oak's reply came like wind through hollow wood. Many have come. Few were chosen. Fewer still survived the telling. The shard knows. It sought you because you were ready, if you do not believe it yet. The shard pulsed against your palm, steady and almost reassuring, though you weren't sure if it was comforting you or binding you tighter. You looked around the cavern again. Hundreds of orbs floated there, silent but restless, as if waiting. All those voices, all those stories sealed, aching, needing to be heard. The thought of holding even one more inside you was overwhelming, and yet the oak's voice returned. Quieter now, almost kind. The library cannot heal without a witness. A shard alone cannot restore what was lost, but with you, perhaps it begins again. The roots shifted once more, and a path opened between the orbs. At the far end, you sought a fracture in the cavern wall, dark as ink, pulsing faintly with the same black veins you had seen in the memory. The oak rumbled low. The wound remains. You may walk toward it to seek the source, or You may walk deeper among the orbs and learn why you, and you alone, still stand here, chosen. The path before you split, two ways open. Asterisk, the two paths waited. One shimmering faintly with a patient glow of orbs. The other pulsing dark with the slow beat of veins. You tightened your grip on the shard. The memory of the breaking still burned to fresh. The sight of those veins splitting through the library's heart. Curiosity was not enough anymore. You needed to see what lay at the root of that wound. So you stepped toward the fracture. The air changed instantly where the orb chamber had felt, heavy with waiting stories. This new corridor was raw, jagged. The roots here were no longer smooth and living, but torn, blackened at their edges. They twitched faintly as if in pain, curling away from the darkness threading through them. The shard in your hand dimmed, as though even its light struggled here. Its pulse faltered like a heartbeat stumbling dot, every step deeper. The walls seemed to close in, the glow of the orbs fading behind you until there was only the faint shimmer of veins crawling ahead. The silence here was different, too thin, brittle. You found yourself straining to hear anything, even your own breath. Then the whispers began. At first, you thought it was memory echoing from the orbs you'd left behind. But these voices were different, hollow. They carried no warmth, no texture of lives lived. They were fragments, brittle shards of words scraping against each other. You should not be here. The wound is not yours. Turn back. Turn back. The shard flared weakly, its glow pushing the whispers back just enough for you to move forward. But you felt it tremble, as though even it feared this place. Finally, the corridor widened into a hollow chamber. At its center yawned the fracture. A jagged rift split the floor, not wide, but impossibly deep, seeping with the same black light that had consumed the library in the memory. It pulsed slowly, like a sleeping heart. The oak's voice reached you, faint and strained through the distance. You have found it. The wound, be wary. It watches. The shard burned suddenly, hot in your hand, pulling your gaze downward. And when you looked into the fracture, you saw not just darkness, but an eye, something vast and hidden staring back. Asterisk, you froze. Breath caught in your chest. The fracture wasn't just a scar. It was a window, and behind it, something alive was watching, was watching. The eye was enormous, but not shaped like any creature you knew. It wasn't round, nor did it blink. It shifted in slow patterns, a whirl of black and violet rings, like the surface of oil on water, yet at its core burned a sharp point of light, steady, piercing. Wherever you moved, that light followed. The whispers swelled at once, sharper now, layered voices grinding into your ears. Leave it buried. You are not strong enough. The shard will break you, as it broke all before. Turn away, turn away. The shard trembled so violently, it almost slipped from your hand. Heat seared your palm, and for a heartbeat, you thought it would split apart the same way the orb had. But instead, it flared one desperate pulse that pushed the voices back. The oak's voice followed, faint but urgent. Do not meet its gaze too long. The wound hungers. The eye is its mouth. The more you look, the more it feeds. You tore your eyes away, heart pounding, though the afterimage still burned inside your head. And then, faintly, you heard another voice. Not the oak's, not the whispers. Softer, broken. It drifted up from the fracture itself, almost hidden under the noise. Help me, the shard quivered, pulling downward. It wanted you to listen, to reach, to answer. Your knees weakened, torn between the weight of that plea and the danger in the oak's warning. The oak rumbled again, louder this time, straining. Do not be deceived. The wound lies. It wears many voices, but the voice from the rift whispered again, so faint you almost doubted you heard it. Not lie, trapped, please. The chamber seemed to lean closer, waiting for your choice. The voice in the fracture lingered, faint as a breath against glass. Help me. Your hand tightened on the shard. The oak's warning echoed sharply in your ears. But so did the memory of the libraries breaking, the countless stories shattered, silenced. What if this voice wasn't a trick? What if someone had been buried in the wound when it opened? The shard pulsed again, not in fear this time, but in yearning. Its glow reached toward the rift like a tether trying to bridge the gap. Slowly, you raised it. The black light from the fracture recoiled at first, shivering back into its depths, as if unwilling to be touched. But the shard pressed forward, casting its glow into the wound. Threads of pale light unraveled from it, thin as strands of silk, and drifted down into the dark. The eye flared wide. Whispers shrieked at once. louder, desperate. Fool, you give yourself away. The shard will not save you. It will feed. It will feed. But beneath their fury came that softer voice again, steadier now, carried along the threads of light. Yes, I feel you. The shard remembers me. The ground shuddered. Roots groaned, curling back from the fracture as if in pain. The eye narrowed, its rings tightening. Violet light spiraling faster, and then, out of the dark, something touched back. It wasn't a hand. Not exactly, but it felt like one. Warm, fragile, trembling with exhaustion. A presence pressed against the threads of light, not consuming them, but clinging to them. The shard blazed, almost blinding, and you heard words form clear this time, carried not by whispers, but by resonance that rang in your bones. I am the first witness. They bound me when the library fell. Free me, and I will show you the truth. The eye's light snapped sharp, piercing straight through you. The whispers shrieked until they were almost unbearable. Lies, lies, do not listen. The shard throbbed so hard in your hand, you feared it might split in two. Asterisk, the shard throbbed in your palm, a steady drum that matched the quick beat of your heart. The first witness answered again, not with pleading now, but with a long, low song that slid beneath your ribs. It felt honest, worn, and implored. Pull, it said, and the single syllable carried the weight of many years. You drew a breath and let the shard lead. The pale strands of light extended from its tip into the fracture-like tendrils. You felt them coil and catch, and then they tightened, anchoring to something deeper than darkness. Your arms strained, as if lifting something heavy, but the weight was not only physical, it was memory, pressure, the folded histories of a thing that had been kept under glass and silence for a very long time. The eye in the wound flared, angry and bright, as if it wanted to swallow the light hole. The chorus of whispers rose into a howl around you. Their warnings scraped at your mind, but the tether held. Thread by thread, the light pulled something toward the surface. Something whose shape remembered sunlight. At first, it was only a hint of movement, a flutter like cloth in water. Then a hand, pale and thin, surfaced into the rift of black. Fingers splayed, trembling. The shard burned warm in your grip, and you felt it give up a fragment of its memory, as if trading part of itself to lift what was trapped. A face followed the hand, not human in the way faces above ground are human, but lined with years, with the texture of bark and the softness of moss. Eyes opened slowly, old eyes, and in them lived the reflected image of the library before the breaking, the lattice of orbs, the oak unbroken, a world that had remembered itself. The first witness pulled free at last. It breathed a sound that was not a noise so much as the settling of stones, and the fracture trembled. The black light recoiled, not gone, but narrowed, pushed back by the presence that had been unburied. The whispers stuttered. Some fled, others quieted to curious whispers. You staggered back, the shard heavy and warm, your knees shaking. The witness stood before you, small, yet impossibly. It bowed once, a gesture rusted with humility. "Thank you," it said. And its voice filled the chamber, not with sound, but with vision. Scenes flickered in the air between you, hands in daylight, chopping a great tree, smoke in a great sky, people who feared what they could not understand. And then a bargain struck in shadow. The witness showed you the moment memory was chained, and how. The first cut had splintered the library into what it became. I was bound to remember what they tried to forget, the witness said. To hold witness while the world turned away. When the shard was torn free, the witness slept in the fracture. Time closes around such things. You have woken me. It reached out, and its fingers brushed the shard. The warmth you felt before steadied into something like relief. The witness closed its palm around the fragment, and for a heartbeat, its form shimmered, fuller, less frayed. Then it released the shard back to you. You will be heavier now, it said, but it did not sound like a warning. The truth is weight, but truth makes a path. The oak's voice came through then, not strained now, but deep and bright, like wind through a forest that has found rain. You have drawn a buried witness into the light. The wound recoils, but it is not healed, and some voices still hunger. The fracture in the wall narrowed. Its eye, once voracious, blinked slowly and withdrew some of its reach. Yet at the edge of that darkness, new fissures shimmered, hints of other places bound and waiting. The witness looked at you with a softness that held both sorrow and gratitude. There are more, it said, some trapped by fear, some lost to convenience. When things are buried to hide pain, the wound does not sleep, grows. But we mend by remembering Piece by piece, it stepped aside, and the threads of light that had led you here remained like firm ropes between your hands and the cavern. The orbs beyond it glowed brighter, as if the whole library had taken a breath. You felt changed. Heavier, yes, but also clearer. The shard hummed in your hand, no longer frantic, but steady. The witness touched your shoulder briefly, and you felt a lift, a small easing, as if a knot inside you had been loosened by its presence. Low and comforting, you have found the first of many truths. Walk carefully. Remember loudly. The roots will follow. Asterisk, the witness stood in the dim chamber, its outline wavering, as if it were half woven from mist, half carved from bark. Though it had only just been freed, it carried itself with the stillness of someone who had been waiting far too long. The shard in your hand pulsed, steady now, sinking with the witness's presence. For the first time since you entered the roots, the glow didn't feel fragile, it felt anchored. The witness lifted its gaze toward the oak's roots above. Its voice, when it spoke, came not as sound, but as images drawn straight into your mind. Do you know why the library was hidden? You shook your head, and the witness continued. Threads of memory unfurling between you. You saw a hall of stone, high above ground, filled with people in cloaks, not villagers, not wanderers, leaders. They spoke in harsh tones, their mouths shaping words you couldn't hear, but somehow understood. They feared the library, the orbs, the memories, the truths. These were not meant to be locked away. They were meant to be shared. But the leaders decided otherwise. They wanted control, and control required silence. So they struck a bargain. A shadow answered them, a thing that lived in fractures and fed on forgetting. In exchange for power and peace, the leaders allowed it to sink its teeth into the library. You saw the moment of binding, roots cracking, orbs shattering, and the witness, the first chosen to carry the library's memory, dragged into the wound. To keep the truth from surfacing, the vision broke, leaving you breathless. The witness looked at you, its old eyes lined with sorrow. They did not only silence the library, it said softly, they silenced themselves, and that silence lingers. The wound you saw, the ayit, is their bargain made flesh. It will not stop until forgetting swallows everything. Your stomach tightened. So that's why the oak called me. Because the library can't fight alone. The witness tilted its head, almost a nod. Not called, it murmured. Chosen, you carry memory easily. You do not drop it, even when it cuts your hands. Behind you, the orbs flickered, brighter now, as if echoing its words. The oak's voice rolled through the roots again, low and certain. The shard has found its bearer. The witness has found its voice. The library is not yet whole, but it stirs. You must choose how to walk its paths, mend the orbs, or hunt the wound that festers beyond them. The witness turned, its figure faintly glowing now. You will not walk alone, it said. My memory is yours, and your steps are mine. But you must lead. But you must lead. The decision weighed heavy, but you knew the truth. Mending the orbs would be meaningless if the wound kept growing. The library would only fracture again. You turned from the glowing shelves and fixed your gaze on the black veins crawling deeper into the earth. They pulsed faintly, like diseased roots carrying poison. I'll find the heart of it, you said quietly. If I can cut it out, maybe the library can breathe again. The witness regarded you with that still, patient sorrow. Then it nodded once, slow and sure. Then we walked the dark together. The oak's voice rumbled, low, uneasy. Be warned, little bearer. The wound does not lie dormant, it remembers hunger. It will not meet you with silence. Still, the roots bent aside as if granting passage. You stepped into the path of veins. Immediately, the air grew colder, damper. The glow of the shard was swallowed by the dark, leaving only a thin aura around your hands. The witness drifted close, its light faint but steady, like a lantern held behind fogged glass. The deeper you walked, the more the walls changed. The oak's root thinned and withered, stripped of sap, until they became brittle spines jutting from the soil. The veins were thicker here, pulsing with sluggish black light, like arteries filled with smoke. The whispering returned, not the gentle murmur of the orbs, but sharp, hissing voices. You wander too far. The oak cannot follow. Even the witness will fade. You belong to us now. The shard trembled in your hand, but the witness reached out, its presence steadying it. Ignore them. The wound will press where you are weakest. It feeds on doubt, not strength. You pressed onward. At last, the tunnel widened into a cavern. The ground sloped steeply down to a pit where the veins converged. A nest of writhing roots turned black as coal. At the center pulsed a sphere of shadow, vast and seething. Its surface rippling with eyes that opened and shut too quickly to count. Your breath caught. The bargain's heart, the wound given shape. The whispers screamed now, 1,000 at once, rising and falling in jagged chorus. Break the shard. Give it back. Forget, forget, forget. The witness's hand hovered near yours. This is what they traded for control. It said softly, this is forgetting made flesh. If you strike, it will strike back. If you hold, it will devour. Choose wisely. The shard flared, pulling toward the pit like a magnet straining for release. Asterisk, the heart of the wound shuddered like something alive, its surface rippling with fractures of light and shadow. The keeper stood with the shard raised, the witness steady at his side. For a long moment, neither moved. Whatever you decide, the witness murmured, the library will carry the mark of it. Not just this place, but you. The keeper's hand trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of choice. He could drive the shard into the wound and hope to seal it in one bold strike. Or he could hold back, listen deeper, and risk that the wound might resist, twist, or demand more than he was ready to give. He let the shard hover inches from the pulsing surface. The air hissed with energy, hot and sharp, like standing too close to lightning. His chest ached, gay, as if the wound was already pressing against his own ribs. I won't end this in anger, he whispered at last. If the library is to mend, it must be through more than force. He lowered the shard, holding it steady but not striking. The wound reacted immediately. The rippling light slowed, almost cautious. Threads of ink-black shadow curled outward, brushing at his wrists, testing him. He felt something faint but unmistakable. A plea. The witness tilted her head, listening with eyes half closed. It remembers not just pain, but the stories it once held. They're buried inside it still. The keeper closed his eyes and leaned closer. Instead of fighting the wound, he pressed the shard gently against its trembling surface, not stabbing, but offering. The shard pulsed, and for a heartbeat, he felt voices, countless voices, whispering through him. Fragments of forgotten tales, fragments of lives that once flowed through this place, aching to be whole again. The wound flared, resisting, then softened. Light seeped out in ribbons, not violent, but tired. The keeper breathed, slow. Then we do this together. No breaking, no binding, only mending. The shard sank into the wound's surface as if it belonged there. The trembling grew, fierce at first, then steadier. The wound's edges began to knit, threads of shadow folding into light, sealing not by force, but by recognition. And still, beneath it all, something deeper stirred, as if this first act of healing was only the beginning of a longer unraveling truth. The witness laid a hand on his shoulder. You've chosen the harder path. It will not close quickly, but it will close honestly. The keeper exhaled. The library held its breath with him. Asterisk, the shard glowed where it touched the wound, a soft ember inside a storm. The keeper held it steady, but the ground beneath his feet quivered as if the library itself was unsure. Then it came, not a voice, but a flood. Images rushed into him, too many at once. He saw halls that stretched forever, filled with shelves so high they pierced the sky. He saw readers of every kind drifting through the aisles, each leaving behind a trace of their story. And he saw the moment it broke, a fracture spreading like fire. When silence turned to hunger and the wound began, the keeper staggered, gripping the shard tighter. The memories weren't just visions. They pressed into him, heavy as stone, asking him to carry them. His chest throbbed. You see it too, he gasped. The witness nodded. Her eyes shimmered with fragments of the same memory. It's showing you what it lost. But look deeper. Not all of this is truth. Some of it is pain, disguising itself as memory. The wound twisted at her words. The glowing threads recoiled, and suddenly the keeper was pulled forward, nearly swallowed whole. The shard anchored him, but the wound lashed back, drawing him into its center. He felt its testing now, sharp and merciless. Are you strong enough to hold me without breaking? The air grew heavy. Darkness pressed at his temples. His knees bent under the weight. The witness grabbed his arm, grounding him. Breathe. Do not resist its weight. Let it flow through you. He closed his eyes and drew a long, steady breath. He stopped, pushing back. Instead, he let the images pour into him, not fighting, not judging. Each fragment, each broken memory slid through his chest like ink in water. Pain, loss, longing, rage, all of it he let pass. Slowly, the pressure eased. The wound's flare dimmed. Its edges trembled again, uncertain but no longer clawing. The keeper opened his eyes, It wanted me to fight, but healing isn't a fight. The witness smiled faintly. Now you understand. Still, deep inside the wound's light, something pulsed, a shape not yet revealed, larger, older, untouched by the healing. The keeper felt it stir, as if the library's true secret was waiting for him still. Asterisk, the keeper steadied himself, watching that deeper pulse flicker inside the wound's heart. It wasn't shrinking like the rest. It was waiting. If I stay here, I'll only circle the surface, he said quietly. His voice shook, not from fear, but from knowing. Whatever's buried deeper won't come out unless I go to it. The witness gripped his sleeve. Then, don't go alone. She knelt, tracing a pattern on the ground with her palm. The light of her touch spread in a faint ring, anchoring itself to the library's floor. I can hold you from here. Go only as far as you must. If you lose yourself, I'll pull you back. The keeper nodded. His chest felt heavy, but his resolve was firm. He lifted the shard, pressed it against the wound, and stepped forward. At once, the world folded. Heat, shadow, memory, all churned together. He passed through the wound's surface like smoke, the shard lighting his way. Behind him, the witness's voice echoed faintly, tethering him to the library. The space within was vast, but wrong. Shelves twisted into spirals, corridors bent in on themselves. Words bled off pages and drifted like ash. The wound's heart wasn't a place. It was a labyrinth made from loss. The keeper walked carefully, his shard casting a glow that pushed the darkness back just enough. The further he went, the louder the whispers became. Not sharp this time, but pleading. Whole stories pressed at him, desperate to be remembered. And then he saw it at the center of the labyrinth. Pulsed, a shape larger than anything he'd faced yet. Not a creature, not exactly, but a core of shadow wrapped tight, trembling as if bound by its own grief. Threads of torn stories hung from it like chains. The keeper drew closer, heart pounding. The shard brightened, answering the presence. The witness's voice echoed faintly in his mind, stretched thin across the distance. Do not try to tear it open. Listen first. The keeper raised the shard slowly. The shadow mass stirred as if aware of him. It did not lash out. It waited. Lash out. It waited. The shard pulsed in his hand, and the shadow mass quivered in response. For a moment, the keeper thought it might finally speak, but instead, light rippled outward, and the labyrinth around him shifted. The walls of twisted shelves melted away. In their place came visions, sharp, whole, undeniable. He saw the library as it once had been, endless rows lit by soft lanterns, pages breathing with warmth, stories humming like a living choir. Readers moved through those halls, their steps light, their faces open with wonder. Every story they touched left a thread of brightness behind, woven into the great web of memory. Then the scene darkened. A silence crept in, slow at first, then spreading. The readers left. The lanterns guttered. Books sagged on their shelves. Whole corridors dimmed and collapsed into dust. The vision shifted again. He saw the first tear appear, a wound in the fabric of the library, born not of violence, but of neglect. Stories forgotten, too long, abandoned, left unspoken. That absence had grown teeth. It had twisted into hunger. The keeper's chest ached with the weight of it. He felt the wound's grief like a physical pressure pressing into his ribs. Another vision came. A figure, not himself, not the witness, but another keeper long ago. Their face was blurred, their hands outstretched as they tried to mend the first fracture. But their touch was harsh, desperate. The wound recoiled, widened, and swallowed them whole. The keeper gasped, stumbling back. His shard flickered. The witness's voice reached him faintly through the tether. Do not turn away. Let it show you everything. He steadied himself, breathing slow. The vision deepened. The shadow mass pulsed again, but now it seemed less like an enemy, more like a vessel of memory, carrying every forgotten voice, every abandoned page, every silence that had grown too wide. The keeper whispered, almost to himself, "You're not only pain, you're what was left behind." The shadow trembled, threads of light glimmering faintly in its folds. For the first time, it seemed ready to be touched. Asterisk, the keeper stood at the edge of the trembling core. The shard, warm and steady in his grip. Its light spilled across the shadow, catching faint threads hidden deep within, like stars buried in smoke. But it wasn't enough. The shard was power, yes, sharp, precise, able to cut or mend. Yet what he felt pressing against him now wasn't asking for power. It was asking for presence, for someone to stay, not to wield. He drew a slow breath. With one hand, he raised the shard, its light holding the darkness steady. With the other, he reached forward bare, his palm open. The moment his skin brushed the trembling surface, the visions flared again. Not images, this time, feelings. Loneliness so deep it cracked the ribs. Hunger that wasn't rage, but emptiness gnawing at its own edges. And beneath it all, the faint echo of what it once was, a keeper of memory, a vessel for voices meant to hold, not devour. The keeper didn't pull back. He let the shards glow, anchor him, and his hand lingered in the shadow, steady. "I see you," he whispered. His voice shook, but it held. "I won't leave you behind, not like the others did." The core shuddered. For an instant, the labyrinth bent as though it might collapse entirely. The tether to the witness pulled tight, her voice echoing faintly. "Stay with me. Don't sink too far." He clenched the shard harder, its light blazing stronger, balancing the pull of the shadow. His bare hand pressed deeper, not forcing, but offering. The trembling eased. The chains of broken stories that bound the core began to loosen, threads unwinding one by one. Pages whispered around him, some crumbling into light, some stitching themselves back into the air. The keeper's chest ached, but not from weight now, from release. For the first time, the wound's heart seemed to breathe, and then a voice, faint but clear, rose from within the core. Not a scream, not a whisper, but the beginning of words, testing their way back into the world. Asterisk, the voice swelled, and then it fractured, not into silence, but into countless threads. A chorus rose around him. Not one voice, but hundreds, thousands, whispers overlapping. Sentences broken and mended. Languages twisting into one another. Each thread carried the weight of a life once told, a story once held, a memory once spoken into being. Some were sharp with grief, others soft with longing. A few carried laughter, faint and fragile, like an echo through long corridors. Together, they formed no single tale, yet the keeper felt them as one, a tide of voices, layered with years of silence, finally breaking. "We are not gone," the chorus breathed. "We are here, waiting, forgotten, but not lost." The keeper's hand trembled against the core, but he held steady. The shard in his other hand glowed brighter, answering the chorus as if it had been forged for this moment. The voices pressed closer. "Do not seal us away. Do not bind us. Remember us. Let us live again." The keeper closed his eyes, his breath catching. "Then that's what I'll do," he whispered. Not silence you, not bury you. I'll carry you back. The core flared. For a moment, the labyrinth shook as though resisting the thought of release. Shelves buckled. Ink ran across the air like rivers. The floor quaked underfoot. The witnesses, tethered, tugged, holding him upright through the storm of it. The chorus grew clearer, weaving itself into something more whole. It wasn't begging now. It was offering threads of stories slipping into him, not to drown, but to anchor. Fragments of names, faces, laughter, journeys. A sea of voices waiting to be remembered. The keeper held both the shard and the core, one hand blazing with light, the other steady in shadow. And in that balance, he felt it, not victory, but alignment. The wound was no longer an enemy. It was something returning to itself. Asterisk, the keeper's breath came slow and unsteady, but the chorus steadied him. Threads of their voices curled into his chest like gentle sparks, not burning, but settling. He opened his eyes. The labyrinth around him shifted. It didn't vanish, not yet, but the edges softened. The shelves no longer twisted so violently. Their lines straightened in places, a hint of order creeping back into the ruin. Dust settled into faint motes of light instead of choking shadow. Far off, a single lantern flickered into being faint, barely more than a glow, but it was enough to cut through the endless dark. The keeper watched it, his throat tight. "You're returning," he whispered. The chorus swelled, softer now. "We are mending, piece by piece." The witness's voice tugged through the tether, calmer than before. "I can feel it from here." The library breathes again. The keeper looked down at his hand, still pressed against the core. Its trembling had eased, no longer clawing, no longer writhing, just pulsing, steady, like a heart finding rhythm after long silence. Yet he knew this was only the first step. The wound wasn't gone. It had opened itself, yes, but the healing was fragile. A spark that could fade if not tended. The shard's light dimmed slightly, as though reminding him the work was not complete. The keeper drew a long, grounding breath. "Then we take it slow. No forcing, no rushing, just steady mending." Another lantern flickered to life, and another. Faint, scattered, but each one casting a small island of warmth in the labyrinth's vast dark. It wasn't victory, but it was hope made visible. Asterisk, asterisk, The keeper lifted his hand at last. The shard's light did not gutter, nor did the wound collapse. It pulsed, steady, as if the chorus itself had learned to breathe without constant touch. For a long moment, he simply listened. The silence of the labyrinth was no longer hollow. It hummed, low and resonant, like the deep echo of a bell struck in some vast chamber. Shelves stood taller. Dust fell away in soft veils, and from the darkness between rows, tiny glimmers pricked to life. Lanterns, hesitant but real. The witness's voice floated through the tether, softer now, threaded with awe. "Keeper, do you see it?" "I see," he murmured. His chest felt raw, scraped open, but lighter. "The library is stirring. She's not whole, but she's listening again." All around him, books shivered faintly on their shelves, not in fear this time, but in recognition. Covers that had been warped by shadow eased back toward their true forms. Titles once erased gleamed faintly in silver ink, as though remembering their own names. And beneath it all, the labyrinth's shifting slowed. Corridors no longer lashed like serpents. They bent, patient, waiting. The chorus spoke again, no longer frantic, but measured. One wound closed, but many still linger. You must carry the work onward. You are not alone in this tending. The library itself longs to mend. The keeper closed his eyes briefly, bowing his head. "Then let her guide me. Let her tell me where to place my hands," as if in answer. Not straight lines, not perfect, but roots that invited rather than resisted. The keeper exhaled, not relief, not yet, but something close. For the first time in what felt like centuries, the library wasn't pushing him away. She was opening. Asterisk. The keeper stood in the hush, lantern light trembling around him like dew caught in spider silk. The path the library offered wasn't straight. It bent and swayed, folding back on itself as if testing his patience. But it was lit, and that was enough. He stepped forward. The stone beneath his bare feet felt warmer now, not the cold, marrow-deep bite of shadow. With each pace, the chorus thrummed inside his chest. Faint but steady, a reminder that he wasn't walking alone. Shelves leaned closer as he passed. Their spines gleamed faintly, whispering. Some hummed like bees in late summer. Others breathed with the rhythm of waves. He felt their curiosity, the way neglected children might study a returning parent. Not accusation, just longing. A book tumbled from a shelf as he passed. It struck the ground with a muted sound, scattering dust like pollen. The keeper stooped, fingers brushing its cover. The title, once erased, was reappearing in careful strokes of silver. Letter by letter, like a memory resurfacing. The river that remembers, he whispered, his voice rough dot at his touch. The book sighed open. Pages turned themselves. Images flickered across them. A girl kneeling beside a water's edge, cupping her hands to drink. A silver moon mirrored in the current. Then the river itself shifting into words, speaking in tones like those he had just heard within the shard. The chorus murmured through him, "The stories are not gone. They wait. They only need light to breathe again." The keeper closed the book carefully, setting it back into its place, and as he did, the shelf around it brightened. Faint veins of light threading through its wood like sap rising in spring. He walked on, deeper into the labyrinth. Ahead, the path curved toward an archway that hadn't been there before. It glowed faintly, carved with symbols he half recognized but couldn't yet name. Beyond it, the air carried a different current, not just dust and shadow. Somewhere, it wanted him to see Dot, asterisk, the keeper paused beneath the glowing arch. Symbols along its curve pulsed faintly, each one exhaling a thread of silver light. They tugged at him in a way that felt older than language, like the sound of his own name spoken before he had ever learned it. He crossed the threshold. The air shifted at once. It was warmer here, carrying the tang of ink, the resin of fresh-cut wood, and the faint musk of parchment not yet aged. The chamber beyond was vast, but not grand. It had the intimacy of a beginning. Tall shelves hadn't yet multiplied into labyrinthine tangles. Instead, they stood in wide, gentle arcs, as if shaped by a careful hand. Their wood was pale, unvarnished, and the books resting on them seemed newborn, their bindings simple, their pages unsere. At the center of the chamber stood a single desk. A lamp burned upon it, steady and unwavering, casting a circle of gold in the surrounding hush. The keeper stepped closer. His chest felt tight, though not from fear. There was recognition here. Something in him remembered this room, though he had never walked it in this body. On the desk lay an open book. Its pages were blank, but the surface shimmered faintly, as though words were trying to rise through the paper but couldn't quite take form. The chorus stirred within him, softer, now reverent. This is where the first stories were placed. The seed of the library, the beginning of the great keeping. The keeper's hand hovered above the page. The paper seemed to breathe, waiting. His voice cracked when he spoke. This is where it started. And in that instant, he understood the library had not brought him here to show him something, but to ask. The blank book was not only memory, it was invitation, asterisk. The keeper let his hand settle on the book. The surface was warm, almost alive, like skin against skin. The chorus inside him surged, but not with force. It was steady, rhythmic, like waves lapping ashore. His breath fell into the same cadence. Slowly, words began to rise through the blank page, thin lines of silver etching themselves across the paper. Not his handwriting, not anyone's, he remembered, but they carried the weight of many voices woven into one. We endure, we mend, we remember. Each line shimmered, then sank deeper, as though the page were drinking them. The book grew heavier beneath his palm, more solid, as if memory itself were returning to it. The witness's voice reached him faintly, tremulous with wonder. Keeper, the library glows, even here, outside. Lanterns are flaring across the stacks. He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the words still forming. They no longer came from him. They came through him, 1,000 tiny threads of memory weaving themselves back into place, when, at last, the page filled, the book stilled, its surface cooled, settling into quiet. The keeper drew back his hand, chest hollowed by exhaustion, but steadied by something deeper. The chorus whispered, fading into a murmur. The beginning is safe. The rest will follow. He closed the book, gently dut around him. The chamber brightened. Shelves straightened, their wood darkening into the rich grain of age. The lamp burned steadier, casting its light far beyond the desk. For the first time in an age, the library felt less like a wound and more like a place of breath. The keeper bowed his head, then let it rest. Let it heal. The symbols of the arch pulsed once more, as if in agreement, before dimming into a soft, steady glow. The keeper lingered only a moment longer in the chamber. Then he turned, stepping back through the arch. The tether pulled, gentle but firm, drawing him toward the witness. He passed once more through the drifting corridors, and as he did, he saw the change. Shelves that had sagged now stood upright. Lanterns swelled with light, one after another, until the halls glowed with a calm brilliance. The library was breathing again. At the threshold, the witness was waiting. She looked smaller in the vast glow, her robes stirring in the stillness. But her eyes were bright. "You did it," she whispered, though her voice trembled as if she still couldn't believe it. The keeper felt the weight of the book still in his palm. Its cover was closed now, its silence deep, but no longer empty. "We did," he answered. For a long moment, neither moved. They simply stood, listening. The hush around them was no longer hollow. It was full of voices returned, of memories mended, of the library's quiet gratitude. The witness touched one of the nearby lanterns. Its flame brightened at her hand, steady as a heartbeat. "It will take time," she said softly, "but the library is alive again." The keeper nodded. His body ached, but the ache felt honest, like the deep pull of work done and accepted. "Then our part is nearly over." From deep within the stacks, a sound stirred. Not words, not the fractured cries of before, just a low hum, like 1,000 pages turning at once. The library itself acknowledging them. The keeper closed his eyes, letting that sound rest against him. The chorus had quieted, but it was not gone. It had found its place, its tone softened into harmony with the greater whole. When he opened his eyes, the witness was smiling faintly, her expression tired but light. "Come," she said. "Let's walk. Let's see the lanterns." Together, they stepped forward into the steady glow. The keeper carried the book as they walked. The halls stretched wide, no longer darkened by grief, but lit with hundreds of lanterns, each flame small but certain. They reached a tall shelf near the center of the great hall. Its wood gleamed, its surface polished by countless ages. The witness placed her hand against it, and the shelves seemed to lean forward. Expectant, the keeper hesitated only a breath, then lifted the book. It was heavy still, but no longer a burden. More like something complete, something ready to rest. He slid it onto the shelf. The moment it settled into place, the lanterns across the hall brightened in unison, their glow blooming like stars in a night sky. The air filled with the sound of quiet pages turning. 1,000 voices layered into one calm murmur. the library was whole again. The keeper stepped back. The witness looked at him, her face lit by the nearest flame. "It belongs here now," she said softly. He nodded, exhaustion easing into something gentler. Peace. Let his breath loosen. They stood together, saying nothing more, as the glow spread outward, reaching shelf after shelf, hall after hall. Above them, the library exhaled, steady, vast, alive, and in that endless quiet, the keeper finally rested.